The dust cloud rose like a furious red beast behind the runaway stagecoach, and Deanna Preston knew in that heart-stopping instant before the wheels struck the boulder that she was going to die in Colorado territory at 22 years old, unmarried and alone. The violent lurch threw her against the cabin wall as the driver's scream cut through the thunder of hooves. Then the world turned sideways and she was falling, tumbling, her body slamming against wood and metal as the wagon rolled once, twice, 3 times down the ravine before settling with a groaning crash that knocked the breath from her lungs. Pain exploded through her left side. She tried to move but realized with mounting horror that she could not. The wagon had landed on its side, and somehow she had become wedged beneath part of the overturned structure, the weight pressing down on her ribcage, making each breath a struggle. Dust filled her nose and mouth. Through the settling haze, she could see the afternoon sun filtering through the splintered boards above her, could hear the distant whinny of horses, and somewhere closer the labored breathing of someone injured. "Help," she tried to call out, but her voice emerged as barely a whisper. The driver had been thrown clear, she thought, but she had no idea if he had survived. Her legs were pinned, her left arm trapped beneath her body at an angle that sent shooting pains up to her shoulder. Deanna closed her eyes against the panic rising in her chest. She had been traveling from Denver to Pueblo, Colorado, to take up a position as a schoolteacher, her few worldly possessions packed in the trunk that was now probably scattered across the ravine. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her adventure in the West after 3 years of teaching in Boston. She had not imagined it ending crushed beneath a wagon in the middle of nowhere. Time passed in a blur of pain and fear. She drifted in and out of consciousness, each awakening bringing fresh awareness of her trapped body. The sun had shifted lower when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching, then stopping, boot steps crunching on gravel, a man's voice calling out, low and urgent, "Anyone alive down here?" "Here," Deanna managed, louder this time. "I am here, please." The footsteps came faster, scrambling down the slope. Then a shadow fell across the splintered boards above her, and she saw him. A man in his mid-20s, weathered tan skin beneath the brim of a dusty hat, dark eyes that widened when they found her trapped beneath the wagon. He dropped to his knees beside the wreckage, his gaze sweeping over the situation with the quick assessment of someone accustomed to emergencies. "Easy now," he said, his voice steady despite the urgency in his movements. "I am going to get you out. Can you tell me where you are hurt?" "My legs, my side, I cannot move," Deanna said, hating how weak her voice sounded. "Please hurry, I cannot breathe properly." He was already moving around the wagon, examining how it had fallen, where the weight was distributed. "The driver?" she asked. "Dead," he said quietly. "Broke his neck in the fall. I am sorry." He came back into her line of sight, removing his worn leather gloves and tossing them aside. "My name is Vincent Crawford. I am going to lift this wagon off you, but I need you to stay as still as possible until I can assess your injuries. Do you understand?" Deanna nodded, fresh tears stinging her eyes. Vincent Crawford positioned himself at the side of the overturned wagon, bracing his hands beneath the frame. He was tall, broad-shouldered beneath his dusty shirt, and she could see the muscles in his forearms cord as he tested the weight. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. The sound he made was almost a growl as he lifted, his entire body straining with the effort. The pressure on Deanna's chest eased slightly, then more, and suddenly she could draw a full breath as he heaved the wagon up and to the side with a strength that seemed impossible. It crashed back down several feet away, and Vincent was immediately at her side, his hands hovering over her but not yet touching. "Where does it hurt most?" he asked, breathing hard from the exertion. "My left side, my ribs," she said, And my legs, but I can feel them. I can feel everything. That is good. That is very good. His hands moved to her shoulders first, gentle but firm, checking for breaks. His touch was surprisingly careful for such large, calloused hands. I need to check you for broken bones. I am going to have to touch you, examine your limbs. Is that all right? Deanna nodded, too relieved to be free to care about propriety. Vincent worked methodically, his fingers probing along her collarbone, down her arms, checking each joint. When he reached her left wrist, she gasped. "Sprained, I think, not broken," he said. He moved lower, his hands pressing gently against her ribcage through her dusty traveling dress. She cried out when he reached her left side. "Likely a cracked rib or two," he said, his expression grim. "Your legs now. I am going to need to feel along the bones. Tell me if anything feels wrong." He worked down her right leg first, and Diana found herself studying his face as he concentrated on his task. He had strong features, a straight nose, a jaw dark with several days of stubble. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, faded white against his tan skin. His hands moved to her left leg and she winced when he touched her knee. "Swelling here," he said. "Can you bend it?" She tried and managed a small movement. "Yes, but it hurts. Probably just badly bruised then." He sat back on his heels, meeting her eyes. "You are very lucky. Nothing seems broken except possibly those ribs, and there is nothing to be done for those except rest and binding. But I need to get you out of this ravine and somewhere safe. Can you sit up if I help you?" "I think so." Vincent slipped one arm behind her shoulders and helped her rise slowly. The world spun and she clutched at his shirt, pressing her face against his shoulder until the dizziness passed. He smelled of leather and horses and something else, sage maybe, clean and earthy. "Easy," he murmured. "Nice and slow." When she could finally focus again, she looked around at the devastation. The stagecoach was completely destroyed, wheels shattered, the body splintered like kindling. Her trunk had burst open and her belongings were strewn across the rocks, her dresses fluttering in the hot breeze like surrender flags. The driver lay some 20 feet away, mercifully covered by Vincent's coat. "My things," she said weakly. "I will gather what I can, but first I need to get you up to my horse and to town. Pueblo is only 5 miles east. Can you ride? I have ridden before, but I do not know if I can now. You will ride with me. I will hold you." He stood and lifted her carefully into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Diana had no choice but to wrap her good arm around his neck as he carried her up the steep slope. Each step jarred her injured ribs, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out, tasting blood. His horse was a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently as Vincent approached. "This is going to hurt," he warned, and then he was lifting her up into the saddle. She nearly fainted from the pain, but his hands were there steadying her, and then he swung up behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping one arm securely around her waist. "Hold on to me," he said, and touched his heels to the horse's flanks. They rode slowly, Vincent keeping the gelding to an easy walk. Diana leaned against him because she had no choice, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm a solid anchor keeping her in the saddle. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she felt sweat trickling down her back, mixing with the dust that seemed to coat every inch of her. "What were you doing out here alone?" she asked after a while, needing to focus on something other than the pain. "Coming back from my ranch. I run cattle about 15 miles west of Pueblo. I was heading into town for supplies when I saw the dust cloud and came to investigate." His voice rumbled through his chest against her back. "What about you? What brings a lady to Colorado territory?" "I am a teacher. Was a teacher. I was hired to teach at the school in Pueblo. I suppose that position is gone now." "Why would it be gone? Look at me. I can barely move. And all my things, my credentials, my letters of recommendation, they are all back in that ravine. We will go back for them once you are settled. And you will heal. Give it time. There was something comforting in his certainty, as if he had decided she would be fine, and that was simply how it would be. Pueblo appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. A collection of adobe buildings and wooden structures clustered along the Arkansas River. Vincent guided the horse down the main street, past curious onlookers and shouting children, straight to a building with a sign that read, Dr. Samuel Morris, Physician. He dismounted and lifted Deanna down with the same careful strength he had shown throughout. She had barely gotten her feet under her when the door burst open, and an older man with white hair and spectacles emerged. Vincent, what happened? Stagecoach accident about 5 miles west. Driver is dead. This young lady was trapped under the wagon. Possible cracked ribs, sprained wrist, bruised knee. She needs examining. Dr. Morris ushered them inside to a clean room with an examination table. Vincent set Deanna down gently and stepped back, but when she looked at him with panic in her eyes, he moved to stand beside the table, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. I will stay if you want me to, he said quietly. Please. The examination was thorough and painful. Dr. Morris confirmed Vincent's assessment. 2 cracked ribs on her left side, a badly sprained wrist, severe bruising to her left knee and hip, countless scrapes and contusions. He bound her ribs tightly and wrapped her wrist, gave her laudanum for the pain, and declared she needed at least 2 weeks of bed rest. I will take her to Martha's boarding house, Vincent said. Martha will look after her. I cannot afford much, Deanna said weakly. The laudanum was already making everything soft and distant. I have a little money, but it was meant to last until I received my first wages. We will work it out, Vincent said. Do not worry about that now. He carried her to the boarding house, a neat 2-story building run by a plump woman in her 50s named Martha Brennan, who immediately took charge. Within minutes, Deanna found herself in a small but clean room on the ground floor, tucked into a soft bed with Martha fussing over her, and Vincent standing in the doorway watching with an expression she could not quite read. You saved my life, Deanna said, the words slurring slightly from the medicine. Thank you. Get some rest, Vincent said. I will check on you tomorrow. She wanted to say more, but sleep was pulling her down, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was his tall figure turning away, his shadow long across the floorboards in the lamplight. The next days passed in a haze of pain and sleep. Martha brought her broth and bread, helped her with the necessities, changed the bindings on her ribs. Vincent came every day, usually in the late afternoon, still dusty from whatever work he had been doing. He brought her things from the accident site. Her trunk, battered but intact, most of her dresses salvaged though torn and stained. He had even found her teaching credentials, wrinkled and dirty but readable. You did not have to do all this, Deanna said on the 3rd day, when she was finally clear-headed enough to speak properly. She was sitting up in bed, her ribs still aching but bearable. You have done so much already. Vincent sat in the chair beside the bed, his hat balanced on his knee. It was no trouble, I was out that way anyway. That is not true. Martha told me you rode out specially to retrieve my things. Why would you do that for a stranger? He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. My sister died in an accident, he said finally, 3 years ago. Her horse threw her while she was out riding alone. By the time anyone found her, it was too late. I think about that a lot, about how scared she must have been, lying there alone. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I could not leave you trapped like that. And once I pulled you out, I could not just walk away. Deanna felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I am sorry about your sister. Her name was Margaret. She was 19. He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." "Have you sent word to the school about the delay?" "Martha helped me write a letter yesterday. I explained what happened and said I would report for duty as soon as I was able. I hope they will wait." "They will. Good teachers are hard to find out here. They would be fools to let you go." He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I should let you rest. Is there anything you need? Just your company if you can spare it." The words were out before Deanna could stop them, and she felt her cheeks flush. "I mean, it gets lonely just lying here. If you have time, I would enjoy hearing about your ranch, about Pueblo. I know so little about this place." Vincent's expression softened and he sat back down. "What do you want to know?" They talked until Martha came to bring Diana's supper, and Vincent returned the next day and the day after that. Slowly, through their conversations, Diana began to piece together the shape of his life. He had come to Colorado 7 years ago, in 1873, with his father and younger sister, hoping to make a fresh start after losing everything in a Kansas drought. They had built up a small cattle ranch through hard work and determination. His father had died 2 years ago, and Margaret's death a year after that had left Vincent alone on the land they had worked so hard to establish. "It gets quiet out there," he admitted. "Sometimes I go days without talking to anyone except my hired hand, old Pete, and he is not much for conversation. Coming into town for supplies is about the only socializing I do." "That sounds lonely," Deanna said softly. They were sitting on the small porch behind the boarding house, Deanna bundled in a shawl despite the warm September evening. It was the first time she had been allowed outside, and the fresh air felt like a blessing after a week confined to her room. "It is," Vincent said simply. "But I do not know anything else anymore. The ranch is all I have left of my family. I cannot imagine leaving it." "I understand that. After my parents died, I kept teaching because it was what my mother had done. It was my connection to her." Deanna looked down at her bandaged wrist. "Coming out here was supposed to be my way of moving forward, of making something new while still honoring what she taught me. You will still do that. Another week or two and you will be healed enough to start at the school. You will have 30 children driving you mad before you know it." He smiled, and Deanna realized it was the first time she had seen him smile, really smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges, making him look younger. "I hope you are right." She hesitated, then asked, "Will you still visit me once I start teaching? I have no friends here, no family." "I would miss our talks." Vincent looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "Yes," he said finally. "I would like that very much." 2 weeks after the accident, Dr. Morris declared Deanna fit enough to begin light duties. The school board had held her position, and she reported to the small schoolhouse on a bright October morning, her ribs still bound but her wrist healed enough to write on the blackboard. She was nervous, afraid her injuries would make her appear weak to the children and their parents, but her fears proved groundless. The story of the stagecoach accident and her rescue had spread through the small town, and she found herself greeted with kindness and respect. The children ranged from 6 to 14, a rowdy mix of farmers' sons and daughters, merchants' children, and a few whose parents worked at the nearby railroad depot. They tested her the first few days, as all students did with a new teacher, but Diana had learned her craft in Boston, and she was firm but fair. By the end of the first week, she had established order and routine, and by the end of the second week, she was genuinely enjoying herself. Vincent continued his visits, though now he came in the evenings, after Diana had finished preparing the next day's lessons. They would walk along the river, slowly so as not to tax her healing ribs, and talk about everything and nothing. He told her about the ranch, about the difficulty of managing cattle in a territory where water was scarce and rustlers were common. She told him about her students, about the challenges of teaching children who had wildly different levels of education and experience. Little Tommy Parker can barely write his own name, but he can calculate better than any adult I know, she said one evening as they walked. The cottonwoods along the river were turning gold, and the evening air held the first hint of coming winter. And Sarah Mitchell reads at a level far beyond her years, but she is so shy she can barely speak in class. You are good with them, Vincent said. I can see it in the way they look at you when school lets out. They respect you, but they also like you. That is a rare combination. Deanna felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. That means a great deal coming from you. They had stopped walking, and Vincent turned to face her. The setting sun cast long shadows across his features, highlighting the angles of his face. Deanna, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. These past weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has meant more to me than I know how to say. I have been alone for so long, and suddenly you are here, and I find myself thinking about you when I should be working, looking forward to these evenings like nothing else matters. Diana's heart was beating so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. I feel the same way, she said quietly. You saved my life, Vincent, but you have given me so much more than that. You have given me friendship, kindness, someone to talk to who understands. I care about you so much. I am not a man of fancy words, Vincent said, reaching out to take her hand carefully, mindful of her still healing wrist. I am just a rancher trying to make a living in hard country. But I am an honest man, and I am honest enough to tell you that I am falling in love with you, Deanna Preston. I do not know how it happened so fast, but it is the truth. Tears spilled down Deanna's cheeks, but she was smiling. I am falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks now, I think. Maybe since that first day when you lifted that wagon off me and your eyes were so determined, like you would move heaven and earth to save me. Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. May I kiss you? Yes, Deanna breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle but sure, and she felt like she was falling again, but this time there was no fear, only joy and warmth and the solid strength of his arms around her. They courted through the fall and into the winter. Though everyone in Pueblo had known they were meant for each other from the moment, Vincent had carried Deanna into town in his arms. He brought her to his ranch on a Saturday in early November, and Deanna fell in love with the place almost as much as she loved the man. It was small but well-maintained, a sturdy ranch house with a stone chimney, a barn and corrals, and beyond it all the vast sweep of the Colorado plains stretching to the mountains in the distance. It is beautiful, she said, standing on the porch and looking out at the land. I can see why you love it. It could use a woman's touch, Vincent said, coming to stand beside her. The house, I mean. It has been just me and Pete for so long, and neither of us knows much about making a place feel like a home instead of just somewhere to sleep. Deanna looked up at him, seeing the hope and nervousness in his expression. What are you asking me, Vincent? He took both her hands in his. Marry me. I know we have not known each other long, only a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Deanna. I want to build a life with you, here on this ranch. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to have children with you, raise them here where they can grow strong and free. Say yes. Please say yes. Deanna was crying again, but she did not care. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. I love you so much, Vincent. Nothing would make me happier than to be your wife. They were married in December, a simple ceremony in Pueblo's small church with Martha and Dr. Morris and half the town in attendance. Deanna wore a dress of deep blue silk that Martha had helped her make, and Vincent stood at the altar in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked toward him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that Deanna felt her heart would burst from happiness. The school board had been understanding when Deanna resigned her position. Women teachers were expected to give up their posts when they married, and though Deanna felt a pang of regret at leaving her students, she knew her place was now with Vincent, building their life together. They spent their first winter as husband and wife snowed in at the ranch, and Deanna could not imagine anything more perfect. Vincent taught her to cook on the big iron stove, showed her how to tend the chickens and gather eggs, how to help with the cattle when needed. In turn, she brought warmth and laughter back into the house that had been silent for so long, filling it with books and music and the smell of fresh bread baking. At night they lay together in the big bed Vincent had built with his own hands, Deanna curled against his side with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. He would stroke her hair and tell her about his dreams for the ranch, for their future, and she would share her own hopes and wishes. Those long winter nights, wrapped in each other's arms while snow fell outside the windows, were among the happiest of Deanna's life. Spring came, and with it new beginnings. Deanna discovered she was pregnant in April, and Vincent's joy was so pure and complete that it brought tears to her eyes. He became impossibly protective, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a book, fretting over her constantly until she laughingly told him she was not made of glass. "I know," he said, pulling her into his arms, "but you are precious to me, you and this child. I could not bear it if anything happened to either of you." "We are both strong," Deanna assured him, resting her hand on the small swell of her belly. "This baby is going to be just fine, and so am I. You do not need to worry so much." But worry he did, all through the summer as Deanna grew bigger, through the harvest season when she could no longer ride out with him to check the herds, through the early days of fall when her time drew near. He had brought Dr. Morris out to the ranch twice to check on her, paying him handsomely to make the journey, and had made sure Martha was prepared to come stay at the ranch when the baby was ready to come. Deanna went into labor on a cool evening in late October, almost exactly a year after Vincent had first kissed her by the river. The contractions started slowly, giving Vincent time to ride for Martha and Dr. Morris, and by the time they arrived, Deanna was settled in the bedroom with clean sheets and everything prepared. Vincent paced the front room while Martha and the doctor attended to Deanna, and when the sun rose the next morning, Vincent finally heard the sound he had been waiting for, the lusty cry of his newborn child. Martha emerged a few minutes later, beaming. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy, and Deanna did wonderfully. She is tired but well. Go meet your child, Vincent." Vincent entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Deanna lay in the bed, exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat and her face glowing with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and when Vincent approached, she pulled the blanket back to reveal a red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Meet your son," Deanna said softly. "I thought we might name him Henry, after your father." Vincent reached out with trembling hands to touch the baby's tiny fist, and when those impossibly small fingers wrapped around his thumb, he felt something break open inside his chest. "Henry Crawford," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Hello, son. Welcome to the world." The years that followed were full and rich. Henry grew into a strong, curious boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Deanna gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after Vincent's sister, and 2 years after that, another son they called William. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management, and Deanna created a home filled with love and laughter and the constant noise of children playing. Sometimes, usually in the evenings after the children were in bed, Vincent and Diana would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, and Diana would remember that terrifying day when the stagecoach had crashed and she had thought she was going to die. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person entirely. That frightened young woman trapped under a wagon had become this, a wife, a mother, a partner in building something lasting and good. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked one such evening, reaching over to take her hand. "About the day we met," Deanna said. "About how I thought my life was ending and instead it was just beginning. If that accident had not happened, if you had not come along when you did, I would never have known you, never had this life. It is strange to think about." Vincent squeezed her hand. "I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." "Do you really believe that?" "With you, yes. Absolutely." He pulled her close and kissed her temple. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Deanna Crawford. You and our children, this life we have built together. Sometimes I still cannot believe I am this fortunate." "We are both fortunate," Deanna said, leaning into his embrace. "We found each other and we chose each other and we built something beautiful. That is more than luck, Vincent. That is love, and it is the most precious thing in the world." The children grew as children do. Henry proved to have his father's way with animals and his mother's love of learning, equally at home reading by the fire or helping with the cattle. Margaret was a spirited little girl who feared nothing and constantly kept her parents on their toes with her adventures. William was the quietest of the 3, but also the most affectionate, always ready with a hug or a kiss for his parents. Deanna sometimes missed teaching, but she found she could satisfy that part of herself by educating her own children. She taught them to read and write, to calculate and reason, filled their heads with poetry and history and science. Vincent taught them practical skills: how to ride, how to rope, how to care for animals and land. Together they raised children who were both book smart and ranch savvy, who could discuss Shakespeare and also fix a broken fence. When Henry turned 16, a young man tall and strong like his father, Vincent gave him his own section of land to manage. Margaret at 13 was already helping her mother preserve vegetables and sew clothes, though she much preferred to be outside helping her father and brother. William at 11 was developing into a fine horseman, with a gentle touch that made even the most skittish animals calm. One evening in the summer of 1892, nearly 13 years after that fateful stagecoach accident, the entire family gathered on the porch after supper. The children were laughing about something that had happened that day, and Deanna sat with Vincent's arm around her shoulders, watching them with a contentment so deep it felt like a physical presence in her chest. "Tell us again about how you met," Margaret said suddenly, as she often did. The story never seemed to get old for the children. Vincent and Deanna exchanged a look, smiling. "Your mother was trapped under an overturned stagecoach," Vincent began, as he always did, "and I happened to be riding by. You lifted the whole wagon off her," Henry said, "all by yourself." "It was not that impressive," Vincent said modestly. "It absolutely was," Deanna interjected, as she always did. "I thought I was going to die, and then your father appeared like something out of a story. He was so strong and so gentle, checking me for broken bones so carefully." "That is when you fell in love," Margaret said dreamily. "Right there in the ravine." "Not quite that fast," Deanna said, laughing, "but soon after. Your father saved my life, but more than that, he showed me kindness when I had no one and nothing. He visited me every day while I healed, brought me my things from the accident, made sure I had everything I needed. How could I not fall in love with him? And you fell in love with Mother because she was beautiful and smart, William added. That is true, Vincent said. But also because she was brave. She had just been through something terrible, but she was already planning her future, already determined to make her new life work. I admired that strength in her. He looked down at Deanna, his eyes warm with the same love she saw in them every day. I still do. Are you going to kiss now? Margaret asked, giggling. You always kiss after telling this part. Maybe we are, Vincent said, and did exactly that, much to the children's laughing protests. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Deanna and Vincent remained on the porch, sitting close together in the comfortable silence of a couple who had shared more than a decade of life. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air cooling after the heat of the day. Happy? Vincent asked, as he often did. Happier than I ever thought possible, Deanna answered, as she always did. You gave me everything, Vincent. A home, a family, a love I did not even know existed. Every day with you is a gift. You gave me just as much, Vincent said seriously. You brought life back to this place, back to me. I was just existing before you, Deanna, going through the motions. You made me want to live again, to hope again, to dream of the future instead of mourning the past. Deanna turned in his arms to face him fully, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. His beard was streaked with gray now. Lines had formed around his eyes, but to her he was as handsome as the day he had lifted that wagon off her with his impossible strength and looked down at her with such determination to save her. I love you, she said simply. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Vincent said, pulling her close. Forever, Deanna, you and me forever. They sat together as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a lifetime of happiness from that moment of crisis. The ranch spread out around them, the land they had worked and loved, the home where their children slept safely. Inside, the house was filled with the evidence of their life together. Margaret's drawings on the walls, Henry's rope hanging by the door, William's collection of interesting rocks on the mantel, Diana's books on the shelves, Vincent's tools neatly organized in the mudroom. This was what they had made together, what they would continue to make in all the years to come. Children would grow and eventually have children of their own. The ranch would prosper and face challenges and prosper again. Through it all would be this, the love between Deanna Preston Crawford and Vincent Crawford, born from tragedy and forged into something unbreakable by choice and commitment, and the simple daily acts of caring for each other. Years would pass, and they would face them together. Henry would marry a rancher's daughter and add his own children to the family. Margaret would surprise everyone by becoming a teacher like her mother, opening her own school in Pueblo. William would take over the main house and ranch when Vincent decided it was time to step back, bringing his wife and young family to live in the home Vincent and Deanna had built. Deanna and Vincent would move to a smaller house on the property, a cozy place with a garden and a view of the mountains, and would spend their later years in quiet contentment, surrounded by children and grandchildren, watching their legacy grow. Vincent would remain strong and active well into his 60s, still riding out to check on the cattle, still working alongside his sons. Deanna would maintain her sharpness of mind, teaching her grandchildren to read just as she had taught their parents, filling another generation with a love of learning. On their 30th anniversary, their family would gather to celebrate, and Vincent would stand up after dinner to make a toast. His hair would be white by then, his face lined by years of sun and weather, but his hand would be steady as he raised his glass. 30 years ago, he would say, I was riding home to an empty house, just another day in a lonely life. Then I saw a dust cloud and heard a crash, and I found my whole world trapped under an overturned wagon. I lifted that wagon off her, checked her for broken bones as carefully as I could, and somewhere in the process of saving her life, she saved mine right back. To Deanna, my wife, my partner, my love. Everything good in my life started the day I met you. Deanna would stand and kiss him, her own eyes misty with tears, and their children and grandchildren would cheer. The party would go on into the night, filled with music and laughter and the warmth of family. And when it was over and they returned to their small house, Vincent and Deanna would sit together one more time on their porch, looking out at the land they had shared for so long. Do you have any regrets? Deanna would ask. Not a single one, Vincent would answer. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner so we could have had more years together. We have had plenty of years and we will have plenty more. I plan on being with you for a very long time yet. And he would be. They would grow old together in the Colorado home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, sustained by the love that had begun on that terrifying day when a stagecoach crashed and a cowboy stopped to help. Deanna would always remember the feel of Vincent's careful hands checking her for injuries, the strength in his arms as he carried her to safety, the kindness in his eyes as he promised to take care of her. Those memories would remain as vivid as the day they happened, because they were the foundation of everything that came after. Their story would become part of the family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The great-grandchildren would ask to hear about the stagecoach accident, and the story would lose nothing in the retelling, because it was already as dramatic and romantic as any tale from a book. A young woman trapped and alone, a cowboy who appeared just in time, a rescue that became a courtship that became a marriage that became a dynasty. But at its heart, beneath all the drama and romance, it was simply the story of two people who found each other when they needed each other most, who chose each other, and kept choosing each other through all the years that followed. It was a story of love in its truest form, patient, kind, enduring, growing deeper and stronger with time instead of fading. As they sat together in the twilight of their lives, Vincent would still reach for Deanna's hand as naturally as breathing, and she would still lean into his shoulder with the trust of someone who knew she was cherished. The accidents of fate had brought them together, but it was their choice, renewed every day, that kept them together. That was the real story, the one that mattered most. And when they were very old, and their children had children who had children of their own, Deanna and Vincent would still take their evening walk, moving more slowly now but together always. They would pause by the river where Vincent had first told her he loved her, where he had kissed her all those years ago, and they would smile at each other with all the accumulated love and joy and shared memories of a lifetime. I would do it all again, Vincent would say. Every single moment exactly the same. So would I, Deanna would answer. I was lost and you found me. I was broken and you made me whole. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Vincent would correct gently. That is what love is, Deanna. Not one person saving the other, but both people lifting each other up, over and over again, for as long as we both shall live. And that was exactly what they did. From that first moment, when Vincent lifted the wagon off Deanna and checked her for broken bones with such care, through all the decades that followed, they lifted each other up. Through joy and sorrow, through plenty and hardship, through the simple daily routine of life and the extraordinary moments that punctuated it, They were partners in the truest sense of the word. Their love story, which began with a crash and a rescue in the Colorado wilderness in 1880, would endure through all the changes and challenges of the years. It would survive harsh winters and scorching summers, financial struggles and health scares, the growing pains of children and the adjustments of aging. It would not just survive but thrive, growing richer and deeper with each passing year, a testament to what two people could build together when they chose love every single day. And so Diana Preston Crawford and Vincent Crawford lived out their days in the home they had made, surrounded by the family they had raised, sustained by the love that had transformed them both. When people asked the secret to their happy marriage, they would simply smile at each other and say there was no secret, only choice and commitment and the willingness to keep choosing each other, no matter what. But in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them, Vincent would sometimes trace the faint scar on Diana's wrist, the lasting mark of that long-ago accident, and he would remember the terrified young woman trapped under a wagon, the way she had looked up at him with such desperate hope in her eyes. And Diana would touch the scar on Vincent's cheekbone, the old mark he had gotten in some forgotten accident of his youth, and remember the determined stranger who had appeared like an answer to prayer, and given her not just her life back but a whole new life beyond anything she had imagined. Those scars were part of their story, permanent reminders of where they had come from and how far they had traveled together. And as they moved through their final years together, still in love, still committed, still grateful for the gift they had been given in each other, those scars would catch the light sometimes and shine, not as marks of pain but as symbols of survival, of healing, of love that had begun with careful hands checking for broken bones and had grown into something that could never be broken. They had found each other in the aftermath of disaster, and from that dark moment they had created light and warmth and life. Their children would carry that legacy forward, and their children after them, each generation benefiting from the love that Vincent and Diana had chosen to build rather than simply stumbling into. And though Vincent and Diana themselves would eventually pass from this world, as all people must, their story would remain, told around dinner tables and passed down through the years, a reminder that love could begin anywhere, even trapped under an overturned wagon in the Colorado wilderness, and that with care and commitment and choice, it could last forever.